Welcome to the BA Coaches Show. I have a very awesome guest with me tonight from the Generation Red Pod. Ken, introduce yourself to the people.
Well, my name is Ken. I have been a Husker fan podcast producer since 2021. What a year to start a podcast, right? Scott and I, my oldest son, started our podcast back then, and it was a lot of fun to do. Even though it was a 3-9 season, it was painful to watch. It certainly stretched us as podcasters, made us wonder, is this worth continuing? And then we decided, yeah, we'll continue. And not only will we continue, we'll add live streaming to the whole situation, which when you're trying to set up a live stream connection from the cab of a semi, like I was trying to do, you had to make sure you were in good data area. I had to use a hotspot on my phone, and then the live stream originated from my laptop. So
Wow.
some days it got wonky. Most of the time it worked really, really well. And having people see me sitting there on my bunk doing a podcast wasn't exactly visual aesthetic that I was looking for with the show, but this is more like it. So after I retired from driving in 2022, we moved into this house that we built in February of last year, and we put this studio in the basement. Thanks. Huge shout out to my wife for letting me do this and buying all the stuff that goes in it. It was not a cheap endeavor, but it's like the old adage. We said it right from the get-go. If you build it, it will stream. Yeah, I know. Field of Dreams reference. And it was really cheesy, but if there's anything you'll know about me, Coach, is the fact that cheese and dad jokes are dead center of my wheelhouse.
Hey, I'm all about it. I'm all about it. And I will say, I love my NBA and our guys, and they have a sick new studio going on right now. But I have to say, I think your studio is the best in the Nebraska Cornhusker fandom. I really do.
I appreciate that. That means a lot to me. It was definitely a heck of an investment of time, number one. Number two, a little bit of dollars involved because I decided to go big or go home. So I spent a good bit of money on audio equipment, video equipment. There's more than just the camera you're looking at me on. There's two more, one on each end of the room. I don't have them activated at the moment, but that gives me the ability to have up to 4 guests in here with me and be able to have them all on their own camera as well. So it's a lot of fun, makes for a really cool interactive show. I produce it all from right here at this table, which can be a curse and a blessing. Most of the time it's a blessing, and there are those moments when it's a curse, but it's been so much fun to do this, and to do this with my oldest son has been the best part of it, because it's the thing that he and I share in common, is an absolute crazy level of fandom for Husker football.
Oh, yeah. I 100% agree with that. One of the things that I've always had with my family as well is just a crazy love for the Nebraska Cornhuskers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I really do like about your show, is that you have you and your son on there. And I think that's a really cool thing that you guys will always have to bond over. And that's kind of something that – so part of me doing this show kind of started to covering more Husker things, as I've kind of told this story. When the BA Coaches Show first started, it was a little bit different. And I was interviewing like other high school coaches, interviewed a college coach, and it was fun. I enjoyed it. I really love football. But I had a guy on my podcast, and I'll give him a shout out, Daniel Chamberlain. He's the offensive coordinator at a high school in Oklahoma. And he told me that he thinks everyone should do a podcast or a YouTube channel or something, because he wants every single person to be able to, when you're gone one day, have your kids be able to find internet footage of you, see what you were really like, or when you're just like an old man, like, hey, what was dad really passionate about? What did dad really enjoy talking about? I kind of took that, and I was like, you know what? I enjoyed doing that. I love football, but something I might love even more than just the sport of football is Nebraska Cornhusker football. Like, that gets me fired up. And I kind of thought, I think this is what I want my, I have 3 kids, but my daughter, she's not as big about football. But even my 2 boys, they're really young, and they still love watching football with dad.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of think of, do I want them to be able to look back one day and like watch me rant about the 2024 Nebraska Cornhuskers? Hopefully I'm not ranting too much. Hopefully I'm on here gloating every week. That's kind of the goal. It's a good thing I was not doing this show in 2022, because I think I don't want to go into it too much because it's going to be hard feelings, but that Georgia Southern game, it was the first time I ever took my wife to a game. So I had gone to a few games, you know, over the years, like every year. I live like 3.5 hours away, but I try and get up there. And I had terrible luck. I've never seen this team win in person since like 2011 or 12.
Right.
It just every time I was up there, they lost. And I was like, all right, my wife's going to go to her first Nebraska game with me. This is going to be the one. It's Georgia Southern. It's Georgia Southern. You know what I mean? And I was so excited. We had a little bit of car trouble going up there, and we made it work. Like, my grandparents were so kind. They met us halfway, and they got us all situated, and they helped take care of the car while me and her went to the game. And it was a great day. And well, it was a great day until that game happened. And I have never been so frustrated. I don't know if I've ever drank so much alcohol after a Nebraska loss in my entire life. My brother lived in an apartment, like just a short walk from the stadium. We had to make a detour to go stop by the liquor store just to buy more after that game. So hopefully the whole story I was meaning to tell there is just kind of hopefully this season goes a lot better and I'm not on here angry after games.
Yeah. You know, if there's anything doing this has taught me, and that is to wait a day. Chill out. Try not to do too many rapid reaction shows. We've done a few of them, but once you've lost so many games that just are painful, you kind of get a little numb to it. And we did kind of a reaction show after the first game last year with Minnesota, and it was just like same song, same dance, same ending, same everything. When is this team going to figure it out? And while I could have been angry, and 2 years ago, the same type of scenario would have made me quite angry. You know, 2 years later, you're like, okay. You know, that's why I think when Nebraska starts winning again, it's just going to be that much sweeter because we have experienced the utter pit with the lack of another turn. The only thing we didn't have to experience last year that every coach team has ever experienced is the fact we didn't have to go either 1-11 or 2-10. We got to go 5-7. We got to win one more game than we won the year before with a brand new coach. To me, you know what? As painful as some of those games were, we were way more close at 5-7 and losing some of those close games than we really were, even with that 3-9 team that lost so many games by one score. They didn't quite have it, and the coaching staff didn't quite have it. So I'm kind of cautiously rouletteistic.
I know. I'm just tired of telling my friends that are around me that aren't Nebraska fans. I'm tired of having to tell them when they're giving me a hard time. No, I promise. If you just watch the games, they're really not that bad. I'm tired of having to say that. I've been saying that for like 3-4 since that 2021 season. I've been saying, guys, if you just watch the games, we're really not that bad. We're really not. We're right there. I've been saying that for 3 years now. So I would love to.
You're tired of saying it.
Yes.
You're just tired of saying it. I get it, man. Completely. I'm right there with you. Completely right there with you. It's hard to watch, but at the same time, you can't, it's like some people I see on Twitter. I don't know why you guys keep following that team. Why do you bother? They're not worth it, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, because we're fans. That's what we do. You don't bandwagon like other fan bases have a tendency to get a lot of bandwagon fans. There's a reason why 10,000 Nebraska fans show up no matter where the game is played. It's because a lot of them live there and they're still fans. They're not going to just switch to the other team that they're living near. They're going to stay Husker fans. It's what we are. It's in our blood.
100%. I have, after some angry losses, I have texted my dad and my grandparents. I texted my grandparents one time after a really bad loss, and I said, I wish you guys would have moved to another state before you decide to have my dad. So that way maybe I'd grow up a fan of a better team instead of settling in Nebraska. I say that jokingly, but there are some times where I'm like, man, why am I like this? Why was I born this way?
I was born in a different state. I was born and raised in Arizona. So for me, you had Arizona State, you had U of A. I could have given two craps from Sunday about either one of those teams. I kind of mildly cheered for them, but not really. The only time I cared about those two teams was when they played each other, and that was only because I hated Tucson and I wanted Tempe to win. So even then, it was like, so if they lost, they lost. But then I discovered this team in the Midwest, and Coach, you have to realize a man of my vintage doesn't have ESPN on every TV every day. Okay. There wasn't no such thing as ESPN when I started following college football. You had a newspaper. You had the box scores in a newspaper, and I started noticing these crazy numbers a team from 1983 was putting up. And I'm like, these guys are pretty good. This would be pretty fun to follow and see where this team goes. Next thing I know, I'm watching the Oklahoma game, and they're about ready to go undefeated. And I'm like, gosh, they're going to go play for a national title. So then they get to the Orange Bowl, they play, Miami does the Miami thing, and you're like, oh, great. Get all this way. And then Jeff Smith goes off on a 25-yard option run for a touchdown, and Dr. Tom doesn't do what everybody thinks he should do, which is kick the extra point, let the voters give him a national title because he tied the game. He said, no, if you're going to win it, you're going to win it on the field. Now, boys, go win it. And unfortunately, they didn't, but it made me a fan for life. I was a fan of Tom Osborne more so than I was the Huskers at first. And then, lo and behold, about 5 years later, this cute blonde moves to town from itty-bitty little Giltner, Nebraska, which, if you sneeze, you miss it as you drive through, okay? So she moves out there as a teacher. She takes a job at a preschool, comes to the church I was going to, and we met. And from the day one, we were dating. And when she found out almost right away that I was a Husker fan, when she told me she was from Nebraska, because in my church, I was in a singles group. It was about 20s, mostly 20-somethings, early 20s, college-age kids. It was like a meat market for young single girls. They'd walk in and all the sharks would start swirling, So I had the fortune of being a Husker fan right from the get-go. So she immediately gravitated toward me anyway. And then 2 months later, we were engaged. 9 months after that, we were married. And here we are 35 years later, and I'm sitting in a studio because she loves me. So that's kind of my fandom story if you needed to know it.
Oh, yeah. I don't even remember exactly. So my whole entire family was from Nebraska. I was born in Omaha, and that's where we lived until I was, I don't even remember, 5, 6, 7, somewhere in there. And then my dad ended up taking a job down here just south of Kansas City. And I was Nebraska was what was always on all the time. And just seeing that, and I was like, you know what? My whole family really likes this. I'm going to start paying really good attention to it. And I know I'm very young, so don't make fun of me. But Sue's big interception against Colorado, that pick six, that's what I was like, oh, man, I don't know what that was, but this is what I want to start paying more attention to. Yeah. And that was one of my first Husker memories. And then I've been hooked ever since. I've been saying this, and I'll say it on as many podcasts as I need to. When Nebraska makes a bowl game this year, I'm going to get the Nebraska N tattooed right on the bicep. I really am. Nice. I really am. I was ready to do it last season. I really was, Ken. Until, hey, you know what? I'll say it. This is 100% my fault. The whole losing streak to end the year. Okay, I'll tell you what. This is 100% my fault. Okay, I don't even blame players. I don't blame coaches. I blame me. I am a little bit superstitious. That's just who I am as a coach. Like something I stole from my dad. Big games, I wear my lucky red underwear that I stole tradition from my dad. Right. So last year, whenever the whole speech came out, the whole "if we die, we die" speech, I got on Barstool.com. I ordered the cool little shirt from Will Compton with the skull and crossbones that says "if we die, we die." It shows up on a Wednesday. I throw it on for the game. We lose. At that point, we had 5 wins by the time it showed up. We lose every game the rest of the way. Every game we lost the rest of the way. It took me till after the Iowa game to realize that this is my fault. I've been wearing this shirt this entire time, and we just went in a terrible losing streak. This is 100% my fault. So I would like the people to know that if you're listening to this, I have good news. I no longer own that shirt. I got rid of it. I don't care. I got rid of it. I'm not risking it again. I'll never wear that shirt again for as long as I live.
Yeah, so everybody send your hate-filled emails.
Yeah.
It's not me. It's Coach. Just trying to tell you. I'm not that superstitious. But I have to admit, there was a shirt I used to wear every single game day. Once Nebraska won that first national title, I wore the same shirt every Saturday for the next 2 years. And then they lost to ASU in '96. And I said, I screwed it up, threw the shirt away. And so you can kind of blame me in some sort of way that maybe the last 27, 28 years don't happen if I didn't throw that shirt away after losing to ASU. So you want to take some responsibility? I'm willing to take my share as well.
Hey, I think it's fair. We'll both take some of the blame. So hopefully moving on to some happier times for us. I know you guys have kind of talked about this on your show, but I kind of want to give my audience, if they haven't heard you a little bit, what are some of your expectations for Nebraska's this year?
Well, I think one of the things Coach Rule mentioned it himself on that incredible interview he did with Joel Klatt about a week and a half ago or so, where he said that if we are minus 17 in the turnover margin again this year, he says there's a good chance at the end of the year I'm playing golf because they should let me go, which I thought was an extremely transparent and cool thing to say. That's what I expect right off the top. First thing I say is less turnovers on offense, more turnovers on defense. That's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see Tommy Hill have a career year, make a case for a first-round selection in the draft by getting 5 or 6 picks. I'd like to see Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmacher, who were half a step away from causing some serious havoc last year in some of those key games like Wisconsin and Iowa at the end, that they just didn't quite get it done. I'd love to see those guys get some strips, get a lot of sacks, all those kinds of things. I expect a better offense. Just the fact that we have an offensive coordinator now who's in his wheelhouse. He's not only coaching and designing the offense, but he's coaching those tight ends. That's his wheelhouse.
100%.
And then you throw in the fact that Glenn Thomas knows what he's doing with quarterbacks. Crap, you saw the difference in Harburg in the spring game. I get it. The defense was vanilla. They were not playing anything too crazy, but there was some decision-making on his part in that spring game that was leaps and bounds better than it was during the season last year. So I expect competent offense, better offense, and I expect a defense that will play similar. I don't expect 18 points a game again. 20 points a game would be acceptable if we're chasing 3 and Nebraska averages 21 to 24. I think we're in a good spot.
Yeah, I'll say the one thing that I was disappointed with last season. I mean, obviously, if you would have told me at the beginning of last season we were going to win 5 games, I would have been okay with it. Now, I would have liked to not go on that losing streak to end the year. But all things considered, I would have been cool with it, right? The one thing I was severely disappointed with last season, I agree with you, that is going to get fixed, is the turnovers. And the biggest thing that I was upset with, and it was more of a shock to me. So I have had the privilege of meeting Coach Rule and a few of the coaches on staff a few times.
Oh, very cool.
And I've got to listen to these guys present a few times, like give coaching presentations of what they are, the brand of football they're trying to bring to the University of Nebraska. And I have talked to EJ Barthel and Matt Rule, both to my face, that the one thing that their teams are going to be known for is not turning the ball over and taking care of the ball. So I have a notebook that I have 3 pages worth of notes just from these guys telling us how they're going to take care of the football. Now, I was pretty disappointed last season when we did not take care of the football, but because I was like, what the heck? This is all you guys talked about all offseason. Like, this is the biggest thing. But now that we're past that, I do think that since that has been such a big emphasis in their program, that it's going to get fixed this year, I believe. Because I just feel like you can't – I mean, I'll say Coach Rule, he was going to coaching clinics all over the country talking about how Nebraska is going to be known for their ball security. Well, he didn't do that in year 1. That's what was disappointing to me, was I thought that was going to be a huge point of emphasis in year 1. And I think maybe it was a point of – but clearly the message wasn't getting received. And I think even all those offensive coaches could agree with me on that clearly the message wasn't being received, and that they got to change something a little up, the way they do their drills or something, just because, again, I think it's a big point of emphasis, but clearly it wasn't drilled in the right way, if that makes sense. Because I think the just turnovers themselves just kind of show that. Just look at the numbers on that.
Yeah, I think I hear what you're saying. I really do. But I also think there's a lot of kids on this team last season that they had kind of in the back of their mind. I remember 2021. I remember 2022. we've been prone for turnovers for years upon years upon years. In fact, it's been a problem at Nebraska since, heck, 1999 was one of the worst fumble years in the history of the program, and that was arguably the best college football team in the country that year. Yeah. You have 2 less fumbles, you're playing for a national championship, and you're likely waxing Florida State in the Sugar Bowl. But if not for turnovers, that's a mental thing, man. I mean, they can drill it all they want, but eventually the players just have to get over that mental hurdle that says, I'm prepped, I'm capable, always going to protect it. And you saw some of the evidence of how much they were drilled in turnovers, because you'd see them go down the field when somebody broke wide open and they'd run into the end zone about 5 yards out. Every dang one of them was hugging that football like it was their long-lost brother. So I think it's there. I think the drilling is there. I think it's now at this point, the kids just have to get it here and get it here. And in here, I believe I'm going to hold on to this football. And Dylan is going to believe that I'm going to complete this pass, or I'm going to throw it somewhere where nobody can get to it. You know, you cut those interceptions back by 6 or 7. You know, you add 3 or 4 touchdown passes to the mix. That's a totally different football team last year.
Yes, 100%. That's all. That's kind of because, you know, there's some expectations of Dylan all over the place, right? And I'm like, I don't even need crazy numbers. I mean, I love them. Don't get me wrong. I'm like, I would love for those numbers to be insane freshman numbers. I don't even need that. The only number I particularly care about at this moment is the interception number. To me, like, I think if I had a crystal ball and I could look into it and see how many interceptions we threw this season, I think I could tell you how good we're going to be. That's just if I could just look at that one number, I think I'll be able to tell, like, hey, how good is this team going to be? I can set my expectations based on that. And I do think that Dylan 1000% has the capability of, especially as a freshman, just like, hey, I don't need to be Superman right now. I don't.
No.
I just got to manage this game. And I do think that we have really good offense. I think the addition of Glenn Thomas is huge for the quarterback room in general. I think that's huge.
Well, you look at Dylan's record in high school. What did he have? 11 interceptions his entire high school career, something to that effect.
It was something crazy like that.
So he knows how to take care of the football. He's had to do it. Granted, it's against high school competition. It's not against the Big Ten defense, but he's also upgraded coaches. So
100%.
Chances are he's going to be as prepared as a young freshman can be. Hey, give me Adrian Martinez numbers throwing the football in 2024 compared to Adrian's 2,617 yards that he threw for in 2018. I'll take that all day long.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That would bode well, because that'd be 1,000 yards more than Harburg or the quarterbacks were able to combine for in passing yards last year.
Oh, yeah, 100%. So kind of one of the questions that you guys had kind of talked about it on your show, and I forgot. What's the number that you guys had kind of predicted for your record this season, for the Nebraska's record?
Oh, okay. For the record, it was our Roulade versus reality show that we did before this last one. And we both, it was kind of a floor and ceiling thing. We just call it reality versus Roulade. Yeah. And we did the same thing last year. It was absolute. It's one of our favorite off-season shows to do, because we just have so much fun with the numbers. My floor has Nebraska at 7-5. That would be my realistic pick, and then my ceiling would have us at 10-2, and very possibly at 10-2, depending on who we beat and where, could very possibly have Nebraska maybe hosting college football playoff game in Lincoln in December. Now
give me goosebumps now.
I know. That's like straightforward, full-blown diabetes drinking the Roulade, but
hey, I can't hate it. Hey, my shirt says "In Rule We Trust."
In Rule We Trust. Yeah,
that's the shirt I'm wearing.
Yeah, I guzzle the Roulade with the best of them. You know what, Coach? I don't know if we've ever talked about this, even in any of our DMs or anything, but Rule was one of the guys that was on my list when they were looking for a coach, especially when he came available after Carolina let him go midway through that NFL season. We did a show. It was one of our most watched. I think it's our second most watched show now on the channel, behind the one we just did with Grant Wistrom and Jared Tomich, which is now our most watched. It's kind of cool.
Oh, that's a great show. I'll let you keep going, but if you're listening to this, you haven't watched that, go check that out. That was a great show.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It was we had the best guests in the world. We just give them a couple of questions and let them roll, man. It was the easiest podcast I've ever done. But yeah, it just was. Where was I going with that? See, I'm old now. My brain.
you were talking about Rule being on your list of.
Yes, he was on my list because I kind of casually followed him over the years when he was at Temple and then when he moved on to Baylor, because he was a frequent guest on the college football channel on Sirius XM back when I was a truck driver. And like weekly, he was on the Chris Childers show in the evening, and he just talked like he talks now. He's no different now than he was clear back then. The same guy preaching the same principles, has the same philosophy. He hasn't changed. And I love that about him. I love the fact that, yeah, maybe the philosophy for the X's and O's might switch here and there, but the philosophy of how you approach the game, the attention to detail, the fact that absolutely everybody in the building is accountable for everything they do and will be held to account. They're not just going to mention accountability. They're going to enforce it. You know what? That to me tells me that we've got a guy in charge that's at least understanding this is a big deal. And you got to treat it like a big deal. And, you know, I don't know what happened with the previous guy so much. I just know he was the hire I wanted. And then when it started going south, I'm like, what's going on here? He lost his dad. I don't know if that completely derailed everything he was doing or whatever, but I just hope he finds his center eventually, gets himself back connected to his faith or whatever it is that he slipped away from, and gets back in coaching. So I think he's an outstanding offensive mind. Scott Frost, and I hope he lands somewhere sooner rather than later. But I don't mean to go down that rabbit trail. But yeah, I love Coach Rule. I absolutely love Coach Rule, and there's a reason I have expectations for this season, and the reason is he's already had his year 2 here. It just happened to be in year 1, and we all know what a year 3 looks like under Coach Rule. Is it realistic to expect 10-2? Probably not. 7-5 is certainly realistic, and I think 8-4 and 9-3 is more probable in my mind.
Yeah, I agree with you.
That's a long damn way to answer that question, but I'm a podcaster. That's what I do.
Hey, I love it. I'm all about it. So I will say I feel like I'm one of the biggest Coach Rule fans on the planet now. And yes, some people, other fans that are not Nebraska fans, sometimes call it the car salesman thing. I'm like, hey, I don't care. He's won me over completely. And I'll say something that, again, I've had 3 conversations with him. Every time I have talked with him, I've always walked away from it and been like, wow, I know it wasn't, but he made me feel like that was the most important part of his day. Like, that's something I really appreciated about him as a coach, was that he, again, just having a conversation with me after a coach's clinic, we talked for 5 minutes, and he made me feel like that was the most important part of his day. And when I went up and visited practice last August, now granted, I had my name tag on that they gave me, but when he came up and shook my hand and say, "Oh, hi, Ben, I'm glad to see you again," all this, I was like, oh, again, I know I had my name tag on, but to me in that moment, I was like, oh, dude, he knows my name. So,
are you a fan of the TV show Suits? Have you ever seen that show?
I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen it. Okay, dang it, because I just was about ready to make a perfect analogy, and you're not going to get it. But I'm going to do it again anyway, because I'm sure you've got people that are going to watch this and listen to this later, and they're going to get this reference completely. There's a character on Suits. His name is Mike Ross, and he has a photographic memory. He doesn't have a law degree. It's a legal drama is what it is. He does not have a law degree, but he's got such a photographic memory. He understands everything about the law, and he just pulls it from memory. Boom, handles situations as they come up, right? Matt Rule is the Mike Ross of college football. Has this innate ability to just know people and connect with people, and the ability to pull anything from anywhere at any moment to say what needs to be said in the moment. Nobody's been better at it, in my opinion, than Matt Rule has been. And please, God, please don't let it just be snake oil salesman, used car salesman. I don't think so. I think the man.
I don't think so. I don't think so either. But I will say there are some people that I know that are not Nebraska fans that warned me of that. And I'm like, shut up. I'm not listening to it. Drinking the Roulade in Rule We Trust.
There's a few former players that aren't huge fans either. So, including a couple that have won some national titles. So I tend to go, I get it, but they also played for the same team that he didn't do so well at because he's not an NFL guy.
Yeah.
And, maybe
I 100% that college is way better suited for him and his style.
Yep,
I 100% agree. So I don't want to get into this too much just because I really like the guy.
I got you.
You know where I'm going with this, but Evan Cooper is no longer at the University of Nebraska. That's news since the last time I, put out a show. And again, I'll say this: no one knows what happened as of this recording. So anyone that's going out there and saying crazy stuff, they're lying. Okay, maybe they don't know because I talked to a couple people who would know, and maybe they're just not telling me. But it was very much like, I got nothing for you. Okay, so you never. I don't know, but all I'm gonna say is this: it is gonna be a blow for him to leave. And he's a Matt Rule guy. He's been with Matt Rule for 10 years now. He's a great recruiter, and I'll say about Coach Coop before I kind of move on from, is he's always been great to me. I've only had a couple conversations with him, but he's always been super kind to me. He's answered any question I ever had, whether it was at practice or after a coach's clinic. He's been super cool to me, so I hate to see him go. But given the fact that he is gone at this point, I'm actually kind of excited about the John Butler hire. I don't know how much you've had a chance to kind of look into any of his stuff, if any, but I'm not going to go as far to say it was an upgrade like some fans have saying, because I feel like that's a little bit disrespectful to Coop, just considering this guy hasn't coached at all at Nebraska. But I will say, given the circumstance, I think this is about as good of a hire as you could have. Do you have any thoughts on kind of the hire that they made?
Yeah, I do. Before I get to him, though, I'd just like to wish Coach Cooper and his family and whatever the personal situation is that caused him to need to leave, I wish them nothing but the best. Prayers up for them. Whatever he's dealing with, I pray it gets handled quickly, that he can get back into what he does best, which is impacting young lives. And that's all I want to say about Coach Coop, because I don't know either. And like you said, and said so very well, anybody out there talking smack or saying that there's some sort of scandal going on behind the scenes or the friggin' sky is falling on the Husker football program, it's not. You know how I know it's not falling is the fact that 13 hours later, somebody had already said, hey, he's got his target.
Yeah.
And the fact that Gary Sharp Saturday morning on the Hail Varsity show in the morning that they do said that he was asked on Thursday why Rule was out looking for a defensive backs coach. So Rule wasn't surprised by this. The only people surprised by this is us.
Yeah, 100%.
And if the response or the reasoning given was personal reasons, can we just leave it at that?
100%.
Anybody on Twitter, anybody that may be listening to this who wants an answer, we don't have one. We're not going to have one until one is provided. Until one is provided, shut the hell up.
Yep, that's what I was about to say. Maybe there is, but we don't know, so shut up.
But as far as John Butler is concerned, and I agree with you, I appreciate your sentiment that it would be a little bit disrespectful to Coach Coop to say that this is an upgrade. However, that being said, his resume,
I can't argue with you there. I can't argue with you there.
Especially since 2018, as far as his coaching resume is concerned, I found somebody on Twitter, and I just took a screenshot of it. It's Jim in Minnesota, one of my favorite follows.
Great
at Huskers MN says, these are Butler's stats since 2018 at Buffalo. First in passing yards per game allowed. In other words, the best in the league. First in passing yards per attempt, first in TDs allowed, first in opponent's passing rating, first in passing first downs, first in average depth per target, second in completion percentage, second in air yards allowed per completion, fifth in yards per catch. The guy has Big Ten conference experience too, being the defensive coordinator at Penn State back in 2013 before Bill O'Neill, was that his name? O'Brien. Bill O'Brien took off for Bill O'Neill's a bowler. How good you get that I know that Bill O'Neill's a bowler. Good one. Bill O'Neill goes to Bill O'Brien goes to Houston to coach Texans, takes John Butler with him. So the guy knows the Big Ten inside and out. He's obviously knows exactly what is necessary to be a good corner or a good defensive back of any kind in the NFL. So does Coach Cooper. The big advantage Coach Cooper has had is the fact that he's been Matt Rule's right-hand man for a long period of time, played for Rule, knows Rule inside and out. John Butler is going to kind of come in, but let me ask you this question, Coach. How short of a list does Matt Rule have in his desk for the next guy up for a defensive coordinator if he's going out and he's grabbing a defensive backs coach whose aspirations are to be a defensive coordinator, and he's got him basically hired within 24 hours after Coop leaves? That tells me he knew who Butler was, knew he had identified him, he was ready to go get him and wanted to go get him, and knew what Butler was going to bring to the table just in case he has to find somebody to replace Tony White in the near future. That's how I see it.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. So I hear the next defensive coordinator talk, and I do think resume-wise, that's 100%. That would be the guy. The only pushback's not the right word. The only question I raise to him being the next defensive coordinator, and I think that there is a good chance that ends up happening if Tony White does leave. Okay, it's not if. When Tony White leave, we just don't know when that's going to happen, right? He might not, but eventually that's going to happen for him to go be a head coach. The only question that I have is how quickly do we think that Coach Butler ends up picking up the 3-3 defense, not just picking up, but picking it up in a manner to be able to coordinate a defense around that? Because this is just my opinion here, and take this with a grain of salt. But I feel like he would have to change it, because when he was at Penn State, and I know this was over 10 years ago, the game has changed quite a bit, but he ran a 4-3 defense, a lot of cover 2 looks, right? And if you don't know this, that's the exact opposite of Tony White. Tony White runs a 3-3 crazy front. He runs a lot of cover 3, cover 1, completely different concepts. And that's kind of generally what Rule has had at both of at Temple and at Baylor, the 3-3 stack, lots of cover 1, cover 3. So, and I'm not saying I would think Butler would have to change his philosophy to be more like that than Coach Rule saying, oh yeah, we're going to go back to the 4-3. Because to me, I feel like a lot of Rule's success, just look last season. I know there was some people not even doubting, but questioning what that defense would look like. I don't think we can argue that defense was great last season. And I think a part of that played into the scheme that we were running with Tony White's scheme. If you check out the Husker Army podcast, I was just on there, and Nick Henrich was on there. And I asked him kind of what that transition was like. And he'd said that 3-3 defense has a lot more disguise. Just as a nature, you're a lot more aggressive and athletic because of it, because you're always moving around. Got to be more athletic. Tackling has to be really good, or you can't be on the field. So my only, again, not even pushback with Butler being the next DC is, do we think he is going to – and he wants to be a defensive coordinator. That's why he left Buffalo. Do we think that in a year from now, he's going to be in this defense, know it well enough to be the defensive coordinator at Nebraska? That's a school.
Absolutely valid question. And I don't have any pushback for it. The one thing I have learned this last season is the fact that the defensive staff that Rule brought in, except for Coach Tony White, were all Rule people, guys that, had come along with them for years. And they probably had some 3-3 experience and all that good stuff. But then as soon as White gets there, boom, it all just seems to come together perfectly. So one thing I know, Tony White knows how to get a guy ready to coach what he wants to coach.
That's a fair
those guys worked so well together. So I'm thinking, number one, I don't have any issues with John Butler coming in and being able to do his job as a DB's coach. No fear whatsoever in that, because apparently,
yes, I'm 1,000% with you on that. I don't want this to come off as me throwing shade or questioning him. I'm just throwing it out there as for the future. You know what I'm saying? I'm saying a year from now.
I know what you're saying. I know completely what you're saying. I completely understand what you're saying, and I don't know. I'm not familiar with the Bills' defensive set? I think they were mostly 4-3, or did they run?
They were 4-3 mostly
Okay.
last season, from what I was able to just gather watching. They're a 4-3
Yeah.
team.
So yeah, there's a lot of disguise for sure in 3-3-5. Which one day when we get you on our show, we'd love to be able to sit and dive into some X's and O's and some basics of football that
I would love
we're
that.
not going to understand because we just watch what we see and hope we can kind of figure out what the hell's going on. Because quite frankly, I would never be able to step up to, like a quarterback has to, look over defense and know immediately whether or not they're in zone or they're in man. I'd have no clue.
Mm-hmm.
Watching on TV, I kind of get an idea because if you can't see the cornerback on the TV screen, I don't think they're playing man-to-man. I don't know. Logic would tell me that. I mean, but if he's lined up on him face up, yeah, I get it. That's probably
I'll tell you, when I come up and visit your studio, I'll give you guys a little rundown if you want some things to look for.
Yeah,
if you want, I'll throw some things at you. I'll just throw some basic things and kind of what I look at just right away.
Absolutely, would love that, because anything that would help inform our podcast more, so that when we do run our pie holes, we at least sound like we know what the heck we're talking about, would be nice. So, but yeah, I'm fired up about John Butler. I hope it really works out.
I am too.
I think just having that steady voice, that understands more about football than a lot of guys who maybe, and you know what, the fact that Rule got to him so quickly tells me he was on a short list for quite a while, and he knew him. So,
and I do think that this being a recruiting dead, we just got out of a recruiting busy period, and now we're going into a dead period, is actually a good thing, because he hasn't been in the college recruiting, not at all since NIL, but he hasn't been in it at all in a long time. So I do think getting with the Nebraska staff and being able to get some of those connections, working with our recruiting staff right now, while it's not super busy, you know what I'm saying? Kind of getting to learn the ropes a little. I don't want to say learn the ropes. But like get back into it a little bit, and kind of how things are different now as opposed to 10 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it could, as crazy as the timing is for the team itself, the fact that you're less than 2 months away from kicking off a season, that's hard on the team. But as far as the recruiting apparatus, you're absolutely right. They're in a dead period. It gives Butler a chance to get his feet under him a little bit. And this staff is really good. They're really good at recruiting. So I have a feeling there's 2 or 3 guys that are going to be able to pick up that slack for a bit when things get ramped up again while Butler gets his feet under him. I think more than anything, he needs to be concerned with coaching. You know, figuring out how to coach this defense, figuring out how to get these guys lined up and all that good stuff. Once he's got that squared, I bet come December, he's going to be recruiting his tail off and doing a good job at it. So,
yeah. Okay, I'm going to ask you this question as a fan that has been watching longer than I've been alive.
Okay.
Are the special teams going to improve this year? Because it's driving me nuts. What do you think? Because I have my thoughts, but I'd like to hear yours.
God in heaven, I sure as heck hope so. It has to, because can it get worse? I mean, it wasn't awful, but I know college football is changing, and I was sitting watching like games from 99 and 2000 today. And here's what I noticed right out of the gate. Those Solich teams were extremely aggressive on special teams. There were no such thing as a fair catch. If you fair caught a ball, we had Josh Davis and his dad, Tony, on the show, I think back in March, something to that effect. And Josh still holds the record at Nebraska for most return yardage ever in the history of the program, because Frank Solich said, "You're not fair catching here. You fair catch it, you got to come over and stand by me and explain to me why. We're going to provide a block, or you're going to make a guy miss. You're not fair catching the ball." I'm hoping we get to the point where we've got guys back there that have that same crazy, you've got to be half insane to return a football. That's what Josh Davis told me. He says, you have to be screwed in the head to want to do this. We need guys. We need, they were always trying to block punts. They were always trying to block kicks back then. There was rarely a punt where they peeled everybody back. There was always somebody coming. And they were good at it. So kickers had cannons for legs. They were accurate. Mm-hmm. So here's my thing. If special teams doesn't make a huge jump early in the season in all phases, I think Coach Ed Foley's seat could get a little warm.
I know. I know. And I hate that because, again, I don't think there's any coach on their staff I would ever talk bad about. But again, he's a guy that I like. So,
Yeah,
like,
I like them all.
but yeah, and I hear the criticism. I will say, I do think they're going to improve. And the reason I say this is, like I mentioned earlier, I had the privilege of going up and visiting practice last season. About 2 weeks before they played Minnesota, I don't know, somewhere in there.
Okay.
And the first thing I noticed right away was, holy crap, who is this guy that I can hear? Because you know how they have the 3 fields there. I was in the indoor facility and I could hear screaming and yelling from one of the 2 fields out there. And I was like, what the heck? So you know what I did? My curious coaching mind, I was like, all right, I think I'm going to stop watching these linebacker drills. I'm going to go walk outside and see what's going on. Right. So I go out there and it's Ed Foley just screaming and hollering about something. I don't really even know what it was, but he was fired up about something. And I noticed that every special teams period they had, he was fired up, passionate about something always going on. And I could tell just listening to him, you could hear the passion in his voice and how much he does care. So I do think maybe they don't. And I don't disagree with you. If they don't get better, I do think that seat gets a little warm. But I do think in my heart of hearts, I'm like, it's got to get better. This guy, could be wrong. I feel like this guy cares too much about his special teams to not let this thing improve. Again, a lot of things could happen, but that's just kind of my thought of, if anyone is going to fix it right now, I feel like it would be him.
I sure hope so. I'm rooting for him. I'm rooting for all the coaches, of course. I apologize to anybody who happens to be watching this video and they saw me take the clock off the wall. I don't know what it is, but that little clicking noise that I could hear coming into my microphone was driving me nuts because one of the hands gets stuck for some reason. It's possessed by a ghost of Barry Switzer or some crap. So I just took it down and took the battery out so I wouldn't have to hear that stupid click anymore. Sorry about that.
But as we're kind of getting towards the end here, one of the questions I kind of want to ask you, and this is coming from me personally, this isn't even just about Nebraska sports. This is just from my heart here. If you have someone that's sitting in front of you maybe that is starting a Nebraska sports, Nebraska football podcast, I'd say you're pretty good at this. I know you don't need the ego boost, but you're really good at this. And I think your show is just going to continue to grow. What advice do you have for just anyone? I'm throwing myself. You're talking to me here, but just anyone in general.
Well, that is such a question. In fact, that's a question that, when I decided to get into this, I got answered by listening to a podcast series that was 100 episodes long called Podcaster Studio. Highly recommend, if you're going to start a podcast, start there. Go to your favorite podcast app, search for the Podcaster Studio, and you will listen to anything and everything you could possibly want to know about putting a podcast together. This guy was incredible, had incredible guests, incredible resources. It's not an easy game to get into. I don't mean to be discouraged because I don't want to discourage anybody from doing this. But for me, the first thing you need to do is be committed. Be absolutely committed that in spite of the fact that maybe the first 10 weeks or so that you throw shows out there, you're going to get 30, 40 downloads. Or if you're on YouTube, you might get 20, 30 views. And that gets real discouraging in a hurry. But do the work. You got to be committed and you've got to do the work. I've been terrible about our YouTube channel until recently. I've really kind of decided it's time to really put some effort into it, and it's paying off slowly. It is a slow burn to build an audience. It's not a quick. There are shows out there that are just magical with their ability to relate to an audience. Shows like No Block, No Rock, Go Big Red Cast, Big Red Junkies, Common Fan Podcast. Those 4 shows right there. And I don't want to take away viewers from you or from me, but those 4 are the guys that do it and do it really, really well. Most of us aren't that good. I sucked when I started. We couldn't shut the hell up. I mean, our shows would be like an hour and a half long, and it's like, why are we doing this much work for 30 downloads a week? So we started condensing. We started working on just presenting things in a way that we could get it done in an hour or maybe just a little bit more. Then the other thing we did, which we thought was extremely important, is what we're doing right now, Coach, and that is collaborating with other people in the same space.
Yeah.
Some people think it's competition. It's not competition for me. I don't care who is the most successful Husker podcast means nothing to me. I want to put out good content that people like to listen to. And some of that content includes other content creators. So I will always err on the side of establishing relationships, which are important. Nobody can do this alone. Establish relationships. One of our favorite ones is the collabs that we do with the Husker Cusscast. Those guys are an absolute.
I can't wait. I can't wait to talk to those guys.
They
will be on here soon. We're working on getting a time where we can get them all on at the same time, but I am looking forward to that. I want to say we're recording it towards late July. I think we have a date set, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
Good deal. Dude, you can't go wrong. Those guys are great. Now, as far as technical, if you're looking for any technical advice anywhere, anybody out there, research your audio equipment. Really, I mean, whether you're doing an audio show or a video show or both, you want good sound first and foremost. You just do. Your sound is good, coach. It works. You have good content. People are going to listen to you regardless of what you sound like. But the better you sound, the more engaging you're going to be to your audience. So research your audio equipment. It has to be reliable. You can get great sound. Like I think I sound fairly decent. This is not my most expensive mic. This is actually one of my cheaper microphones running through a decent USB interface. You can get this set up for around $300. You know, these little arms, these aren't cheap. I bought the good one. So you don't have to spend what I spent on the arm, but it's worth it to just get it off the table for the most part. And that way, if you bump the table too much, it at least absorbs some of the shock, helps with the audio sound. Video, decent webcam, something built into a laptop, ain't going to cut it. Just go get yourself a little Logitech webcam to begin with at Best Buy. You can get them for $100 for a decent one. And then just get some lights. Get some lights that shine on your face. Turn off the overhead light. Get lights that shine on your face. It's just going to make you look that much better on camera when you're doing a YouTube show. Make it easier to watch the show all the way through. And then if you really feel ambitious and you want to build something like I have, don't. I want to still be known as the best studio in podcast, man. So don't do this. It's not worth your time. It's done nothing for our channel at all. So don't do it. Honest. No, I'm kidding. By all means, there's a lot of shows out there that have really upgraded what they're doing with their backgrounds and with studios and all that things and with their sound. And I'd like to think we kind of had a little bit of something to do with that we just kind of shot in there and did things differently from everybody else. And I think it makes a difference. I think sound is huge. Video, if you're going to do YouTube, don't play around with the laptop video camera. Just if you can get away from it and you can spend a couple of $100 on a decent webcam, it'll be worth your time. Other than that, anything else you need to know? Other than, you got to have your own YouTube channel, and that's free. StreamYard, if you use that you're using tonight, Coach, that I use for our show, is free. It just puts a watermark on your video. It's not real expensive to have it paid for and not have a watermark, be able to do custom graphics and all that. It just gives your show a professional look. And then, of course, an audio host of some sort, Spreaker, Spotify, whatever it is, you can set up an account there for relatively cheap, if not free, and be able to upload your audio so that people have both a video and an audio option to consume your content, which to me, that's what you want. You want both. You really do.
Oh yeah. Well, thank you for that. That was a very good answer. You've given me great answers all day. I want you to know you've given me some really good ones. But I do agree with you. And I'll say the biggest thing for me that has helped me so far is kind of like you said, the relationships that I've built within the Husker community over the last month and a half has been insane. And it's kind of blown my mind. And it's been really cool to me. And I'm still kind of getting used to some of it. Like last week, whenever I was on the Voice of College Football channel, I was like, I've been watching this for a little bit. Now I'm a guest on here. Or like when I was just on the Husker Army show, I was like, holy crap, people want to listen to me talk. And I'm still getting used to that a little bit. You know what I mean? I'm still getting used to the fact that people want to hear my opinions on things. And I do understand that I'm aware enough to know that people do want to listen to me speak because I have coached football and I've coached football at some really big schools. And I understand what I'm looking at, if that makes sense. And I don't want to throw this any shade towards but like I understand the game of football more than the general population watching games, I'll say.
Yeah.
So I understand why, but it's also still like, man, I still can't believe people want to listen to me talk. That's still getting used to.
It does. It takes some bit of getting used to. The fact that we even built an audience to begin with blew my mind. We had started out completely on our own, no association with any networks of any kind. And then in 2023, when we did one of our first shows here in the studio, I think I told you about it in a DM, where we had Brian from Husker Army and Honky from Go Big Redcast and Andrew from Big Red and More, which those guys are a hoot too. If you ever get a chance, reach out to them.
Oh yeah.
And we just sat around this table that I'm sitting at right now. We just talked about the spring game from 2023, and it grabbed the attention of Herd at Sports, and they asked us to come on their network. Now, there was a little snafu. Wasn't their fault. It was probably on my end. When I went to redirect the audio feed to their server instead of the server we were using, somehow all of our Apple subscribers did not transfer. So 90% of our audience we had to rebuild. I have no idea if we got any of those old listeners back. No clue. There was no way to let them know we moved. So I'm hoping we did. Our numbers are back up to where they were back before we went to Herd at, but it was just a weird. So yeah, if someone comes along or if Mark Rogers TV and all those guys come along and they want to help you out and get you moved over to an audio platform that might have a little bit more exposure, make sure you understand that there could be technical difficulties getting everything transferred. So it had me pull what little hair I have left in my head out, and it just was not much fun. But it's been overall a great partnership because it's gotten us some good support. We've been able to connect with a bunch of other podcasts we hadn't connected with before. And it ultimately is the reason why Grant Wistrom and Jared Tomich were on our podcast a couple weeks ago, was because they were really a big part of the day-by-day documentary that came out over the last few years. I don't know if you've seen it. I highly
it's awesome.
recommend.
It's awesome.
So we had Justin LaPera, the director. He was on our show back in 2022, right after the first part came out. And then we got Josh and Tony Davis, because Josh was kind of the spearhead with Justin to get the documentary off the ground. And then next thing I know, I'm in a group text with Grant Wistrom and Jared.
That's awesome. That's
and Amon Green and Jason Peter and people like that. I'm like, where? And Josh was like, this is Ken. He and Scott are all in Nebraska all the time. They'd be a great podcast for you guys to be on. And boom, there we were. So
that's awesome, man.
And Nebraska football at the Voice of College Football is one of my favorite channels too. And when Justin invited me on and then Scott as well for a couple of appearances, I was amazed at what that did for our channel, number one, because it just got that much more exposure out there. And he has said to me numerous times, he said that the same tide rises all boats. And there's no reason to work against another boat when you could just work together. And so
that's a very similar conversation that we had as well.
Yep. And then he gave me a lot of advice for how to name my episodes so that the algorithm will find them on YouTube, and how to design an icon or a thumbnail so it grabs the algorithm too. So if you notice, a lot brighter colors and stuff involved with our thumbnails.
I have noticed you're picking up your game over there.
It looks and it's made a difference. It made a difference. No ifs, ands, or buts. So anyway, I don't know. Is that it?
Hey, before we, officially end this thing here, where can we find you? Where can we find all your stuff?
It's all at the same spot. Gen Red Pod on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. Just type Gen Red Pod. You'll find us in all three spots. If you're looking for an audio only show, that's Generation Red on your favorite audio podcast app. And genredpod.com is our website, where you can listen to all of our old shows or watch all of our shows from YouTube right there on the website, and genredpod@gmail.com if you want to send us an email.
That is awesome. All right. Before I know I just said this again, before we really wrap up now, talk to us about this. Talk to us about this golf event you have going on, because this is awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to do that. It was April 26th. I was in the studio here doing an impromptu quick podcast with Redcast Rob from the Go Big Redcast. He was in town on business, so he hopped by and we were talking. Next thing you know, we heard sirens going off. I thought it was just an ambulance or something going by, but they weren't getting quieter or louder. So we were like, that's not a good siren. So next thing you know, we're sheltering here in the studio because it's one of the best rooms in the house to do that, watching the craziness that was going on outside on the TV, and decided it made such an impact. I've been through storms before. It's not that big a deal, but for some reason this one stuck. And I think it was, I think it was God saying you need to do something. So here I am. I'm doing something. I decided that I'd channel my passion for playing really bad golf into a charity golf scramble. And that will be on October 12th, 2024. So if you're having the bye week blues about then, which all of us will be, come out and play golf. To be a part of the charity scramble, you have to register as a team. That is a total of $500 up front to register your team. You need to include all 4 names of your team members. That way the golf course can make sure they have nameplates and all that stuff on all the carts. You'll get GPS capabilities right there on the cart. You'll get a banquet at the end. Awards will be available. There's on-course games. There's flag and team prizes. There will be a silent auction as well as a live auction, which will feature a signed jersey that I got from Grant Wistrom. So if you want to be a part of that, go to genredpod.com. You'll find a link at the top of the very top of the page where you can click to the page where you can sign up and hit the links to the registration. You can register your team, and then if you want to sponsor a hole, you can do that as well. $250, get your name on a sign at any one of the 18 holes, and gives a little more visibility for your business and helps out a great cause, because all the proceeds will be donated to the Salvation Army for continuing relief for the victims of the tornadoes on 426. So thank you for giving me a chance to share that.
Oh, yeah. I think it's an awesome thing that you're doing, and I plan on being up there for it.
Cool.
I'm trying to make plans to make sure I'm up there for it and see all you guys. And yeah, but hey, thank you for joining me today. You are someone that I 1000% wanted to have on this show. So I really do appreciate all the support you've given me through the power of social media. There's a lot of negative social media, but there's some positive things. And I'd say this friendship I'm building with you is a big positive for me. So thank you for all the support and for joining me today.
Well, Coach, I'd like to say thank you as well to you for having me on, not only just for having me on, but for being a gracious host, for doing what you do, for providing content that gives a little bit more knowledge, a little bit more teeth to the idea of college football than what podcasters like myself can provide, because I'm not the expert in the game like you are. So keep doing the good work, keep fighting the good fight. Don't give up, keep promoting, keep talking, keep reaching out. And by all means, man, go Big Red and stay a fan, because it's worth it out here.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely worth it. And, I appreciate you very, very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I am really looking forward to you sitting at this table here.
I am very much looking forward to that. I'm very much looking forward to that.
Yep. That'll be live August 4th, right here in the Gen Red Pod studio with Scott here as well. So,
that will be
July
awesome.
21st, we have Chancellor Brewington in the studio as well. So that'll be our next show.
Oh, yeah. Well, as always, GBR and in rule we trust.
Guzzle that Rule-Aid.